Under the burning hush of an evening sun, the plains of Wyoming stretched wide and endless, every blade of dry grass whispering of solitude. Dust rose in slow spirals behind the wooden crutches of Ayanna, a native woman of 20, her slender figure outlined by the copper light of day's end. Each step she took was measured, deliberate, the soft thud of her wooden supports marking her existence like a clock no one cared to hear. Children sometimes watched her from the porches, their laughter catching in their throats when their mothers tugged them back inside. The townsfolk pitied her, yes, but pity in these parts was another name for distance. She kept her head low, braids swaying against her back, and whispered to herself that she was content. Yet some nights, when the sky bled violet, she would trace the scars of old dances in the dirt and wonder if she had been meant for something else before the sickness came. That afternoon, she paused by the well, the bucket rope rough beneath her hands, her breath uneven. Across the horizon, a rider approached, a figure so far away he seemed only a trick of heat. The horse's hooves struck rhythm against the earth, slow and sure, until the shape became real. A man weathered by the road, his coat frayed, his hat shadowing a face carved by wind and regret. Caleb Hart, 30 years old, rode with the quiet heaviness of one who had seen too much and learned too little about peace. He came not for love but for work, not for belonging but for somewhere to lay down the ache in his bones. When his horse halted at the edge of town, Ayanna's basket slipped from her arm, apples rolling like small suns across the dirt. She bent awkwardly, struggling to catch them before they bruised. Caleb dismounted without a word and gathered the fruit in his rough palms, placing them gently into her lap. Their eyes met, hers wary and dark, his steady and tired, and for a breath too long the world fell silent. Then she turned away, mumbling thanks. The onlookers, a few women from the mercantile, whispered behind their gloved hands. "The cripple girl and the drifter," one said. The words drifted through the air like dust, settling on Caleb's shoulders, but he said nothing. He tipped his hat and rode toward old Jonah's ranch at the edge of the plain. Still, as the horizon swallowed him, he looked back once, just once, and found her still standing there, watching him vanish. In the following days, Caleb worked hard beneath the punishing sun. He mended fences, drove cattle, and slept in the barn loft with the smell of hay and horses for company. But at night, when the wind sighed through the boards, he thought of the girl with the wooden crutches and the calm, bruised dignity in her eyes. Something about her silence unsettled him. It was not weakness but endurance, and he'd seen enough of both to know the difference. Ayanna lived on the far edge of town in a small cabin her late mother had built. She spent her mornings sewing and her evenings feeding sparrows by the riverbank. Sometimes she drew in the dirt with a stick, shapes that meant nothing to others but everything to her. One dusk, as the world turned the color of embers, Caleb found her there, tracing spirals into the sand. He didn't mean to intrude, yet something in her loneliness called to his own. "You draw well," he said quietly. She looked up, startled, her crutches beside her. "They're not drawings. Just memories of dances." He stepped closer, kneeling to see. "Dances? I used to dance during summer gatherings," she whispered, "before the fever took my leg." Her voice trembled like a fragile note. "Now I dance only here, in the dirt. No one sees. No one laughs." Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her that she was beautiful, that grace had nothing to do with legs or pity. But words had betrayed him too many times before. So instead, he picked up a twig and drew beside her, a crude attempt at a horse. She laughed softly, the sound startling even her. "Not much of an artist," she teased. "Never claimed to be." He smiled faintly. "But maybe I'll get better if you keep showing me." Her gaze softened, curiosity flickering where caution once lived. Yet when the wind carried footsteps from the road, a passerby, slowing to watch, she turned her face away. Shame was a weight she had learned to carry long before her crutches. Over the next weeks, small gestures passed between them like secret letters. Caleb fixed the broken step at the chapel so she wouldn't stumble. He left carved tokens of animals by the path she walked, rough but made with care. Ayanna pretended not to notice, though her fingers lingered over them as one touches a prayer. He never said why he did these things, and she never asked. Perhaps they both feared the answer. But the town noticed. The whispers began again, sharper this time. "That cowboy's lost his mind," said one. "Helping the lame girl won't get him anywhere." Even Etta May, the saloon owner with kind eyes, pulled Caleb aside. "People talk," she warned gently. "You've got a good heart, but don't go breaking it over a girl the town won't let you have." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I don't care what the town allows." Yet later that night, as the lamps flickered low, he sat alone by the barn door, watching the stars blink over the plains. He cared more than he wanted to admit. He cared that Ayanna still walked alone, head bowed beneath the weight of other people's mercy. One stormy evening, rain poured without mercy, turning the dirt roads to rivers. Ayanna struggled to cross from the chapel to her cabin, the mud pulling at her crutches. Before she could fall, strong arms lifted her, Caleb's voice close to her ear. "Got you," he said simply. She clung to him, trembling from the cold and the nearness. When he set her down on her porch, she couldn't meet his eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," she murmured. "Why not?" "Because people will see. They'll talk. They'll think," she trailed off, her cheeks flushed with shame. He reached for her hand but stopped short of touching it. "Let them think what they want." Lightning lit the plains, and for a heartbeat she saw his face clearly, the lines of kindness carved deep as scars. But kindness was dangerous. It could turn to pity, and pity was something she could not bear. So she turned away. "Please, Caleb. Don't come any more." He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but he saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of being pitied, not loved, and he nodded once. "All right." Then he left, his boots sinking into the wet earth, leaving her porch emptier than before. Weeks slipped by. Ayanna went back to her solitude, pretending not to wait for him. Caleb threw himself into ranch work, but each swing of the hammer, each pull of rope, only echoed her name in his mind. The world grew smaller without her laughter in it. When the town held its harvest festival, lanterns strung across the square like low-hanging stars, Ayanna almost stayed home. But something in her heart, something stubborn and wild, whispered that she had hidden long enough. She dressed in a red shawl her mother once wore, and walked into town on her wooden crutches. Every step was a defiance. The music faltered as she appeared. Conversations stilled. Eyes followed her like arrows. She stopped at the edge of the square, breath shaking, but she refused to turn back. Then a familiar voice spoke softly from the crowd. "Dance with me." Caleb stepped forward, hat in hand, his gaze unwavering. The people around them muttered. Someone laughed nervously. But Caleb didn't move. His hand extended toward her, waiting, not demanding, only offering. Her crutches shifted beneath her arms. "I can't," she whispered. "Then let me hold you." The silence stretched until the music trembled back to life. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, the warmth of it startling, real. He drew her close, his arm steady at her waist, her crutches resting against his side. Together they swayed, not perfectly, not gracefully, but truthfully. The crowd, stunned into quiet, watched the cowboy and the crippled girl move as though the world itself had slowed to their rhythm. By the end of the song, tears shone in Ayanna's eyes, not from shame but from something deeper, a freedom she had not felt in years. When the final note faded, Caleb leaned close, his voice rough. "Now you've shown them who you are." "And who's that?" she breathed. "The bravest woman I've ever known." Days later, as dawn spread pale gold across the land, Caleb rode to her cabin. She stood by her garden, hair loose, eyes cautious but not closed. He dismounted and knelt before her mother's grave, the earth still fresh with wildflowers. "I swear I'll honor her daughter," he said quietly, "and never let her walk this life alone." Ayanna shook her head, tears catching the morning light. "Caleb, I'm broken. You deserve someone whole." He rose, took her hand, pressed it to his chest. His heartbeat was steady, resolute. "You're the only one I want." The words were not grand, not poetic, just truth, spoken from a place no one could mock. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and promise, and for the first time, Ayanna didn't feel small beneath the sky. Their wedding took place a week later in the small white chapel by the prairie. The benches were half empty, yet those who came did so with quiet wonder. Edame brought flowers from her garden, old Jonah offered his blessing, and even Sheriff Reed, grim-faced and silent, removed his hat when Ayanna entered. She wore a handmade dress of pale linen, simple and pure, her braids adorned with feathers and sprigs of sage. Caleb stood at the altar, hat in hand, his eyes unashamedly full. When the preacher asked for vows, Ayanna's voice trembled. "You've given me back what I thought was lost," she said. "Not my legs, but my place in the world." Caleb smiled faintly. "You gave me mine." As the rings were exchanged, he lifted her gently, steadying her so she could stand beside him. The church bells rang once, then twice, clear and defiant against the empty prairie. Outside, the sky opened in sunlight, spilling gold over everything it touched. They built a small home near the river, days filled with laughter, her tending the garden, him mending fences. She learned to ride beside him, crutches tied to the saddle, wind in her hair. Nights by the fire were quiet and full. The town's gossip faded like dust after rain. Years passed, and their love grew steady as the mountains. Sometimes she'd watch him from the porch, and when their eyes met, they'd share a smile that needed no words. The prairie remembered their laughter long after they were gone. An old man would tell their tale beneath a sunset sky. There was a girl who thought no man could love her, and a cowboy who proved love rides on the heart, not the legs. He'd pause, watching the horizon. "Love ain't about who stands tall, it's who stands beside you." And somewhere out there, two shadows still ride side by side beneath the golden Wild West sun.